Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a stack of materials here. News reports, official statements, some commentary, all focused on something pretty major in higher ed.
Yeah, a really big one.
Columbia University, top-tier school, facing a serious challenge to its accreditation. Sounds technical, maybe, but the consequences are huge.
Absolutely. This isn't just theory. It's about the real nuts and bolts, how these places run, and crucially, how they get funded.
Right.
The news hook is the U.S. Department of Education. Under the Trump administration, Secretary Linda McMahon has told Columbia's accreditor that the university seems to be out of step with federal law.
That accreditor is the Middle States Commission on Higher Education, right? MSCHE.
That's them, MSCHE. And yeah, the DOE sent them a formal notification.
So our mission today, let's really dig into these sources. We want to figure out why this is happening now, what's actually at stake for Columbia, for its students, and maybe what this tells us about, the whole system. Government, universities, accreditors, it's complicated.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the sources give different angles, the official reasons, Columbia side, outside takes, even critiques of accreditation itself. That range is important. It shows it's not straightforward.
Okay, so let's dive in. What exactly kicked this all off? What's the main charge from the Department of Education against Columbia?
The core accusation is that Columbia University violated federal anti-discrimination law.
Which law specifically?
Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Title VI. Okay, the big one. Prohibits discrimination based on race, color, national origin if you get federal money. So how did DOE say Columbia messed up here?
Well, the department's Office for Civil Rights did an investigation. Their finding is that after the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attack on Israel, Columbia's leadership showed deliberate indifference to serious and widespread harassment of Jewish students on campus.
Deliberate indifference. That sounds like a specific legal phrase. What does it actually mean here?
It is specific. Under Title VI, it's not just about being unaware or maybe a bit slow. It means the university knew about the harassment, and their response was clearly unreasonable given what they knew. They didn't act effectively to stop it.
So it implies they knew better or should have and failed to act properly. What did Secretary McMahon say about this?
She was pretty blunt. The sources quote her saying, "After Hamas's October 7, 2023 terror attack on Israel, Columbia University's leadership acted with deliberate indifference towards the harassment of Jewish students on its campus. This is not only immoral, but also unlawful."
Wow.
And the DOE concludes this failure meant the school failed to meaningfully protect Jewish students against severe and pervasive harassment.
Okay, and this all connects back to events starting in October 2023. Can you give us a quick timeline up to this accreditation notification?
Sure. So the alleged deliberate indifference period starts right after October 7th, 2023. Then the DOE's Office for Civil Rights starts a specific investigation into Columbia in February 2025, looking into claims of discrimination based on Jewish ancestry. And then, boom, June 4th, 2025, the DOE sends the formal letter to MSCHE, the accreditor, saying Columbia violated Title VI. And because of that, it no longer appears to meet MSCHE's own standards.
Which require following the law, I assume.
Exactly. Which brings us to part two. Why telling the accreditor is such a heavy move.
Right. MSCHE, the Middle States Commission, you said they're essential for Columbia. Why?
Well, accreditation from a body like MSCHE isn't just, a gold star for quality. It's much more fundamental than that.
It's the gatekeeper thing you mentioned.
Precisely. Accreditation is the official stamp that allows universities to access federal student aid. Billions of dollars, federal student loans, Pell Grants for low-income students.
Yeah.
All that flows through accredited institutions.
So no accreditation, no federal aid money.
That's the bottom line. Lose accreditation, you're cut off. It's a huge financial lifeline, both for the school and for students trying to afford it.
And Secretary McMahon pointed this out, too.
Yep. She said accreditors have an enormous public responsibility as gatekeepers of federal student aid. They determine which institutions are eligible. She basically puts the onus on accreditors to make sure their schools follow the rules, including anti-discrimination laws.
And MSCHE's rules do require following the law.
Absolutely. Their standards for accreditation explicitly say member institutions have to comply with all applicable government laws and regulations. That includes Title VI. So when DOE says Columbia violated Title VI,
they're directly telling MSCHE that Columbia isn't meeting that accreditation standard.
Exactly. It connects the legal finding straight to their accreditation status.
So what does this actually mean on the ground? For students first.
Potentially devastating. If Columbia were to actually lose accreditation, and that's a big if, It's not immediate students using federal aid couldn't use it there anymore.
How many students are we talking about at Columbia? Is it a lot?
It's significant. The sources say around 24% of first years and maybe 21% of all undergrads get Pell Grants. These are students with major financial need. A Pell Grant might be the only reason they can afford a place like Columbia, where tuition alone is, over $71,000 a year.
So they basically have to leave.
Likely, yes. They'd need to transfer somewhere else that is accredited to keep getting that federal support.
And what about the university itself?
Catastrophic, really. Losing federal aid eligibility hits the budget hard, obviously, but also the reputation. It could seriously impact applications, enrollment. It's described as one of the worst penalties a university can face.
It really highlights the power tied to accreditation. Okay, let's widen the lens a bit. This is happening under the Trump administration. How does this fit into their overall approach to higher education?
Well, it's not happening in a vacuum. The DOE letter, explicitly mentioned it, was sent pursuant to President Trump's executive order reforming accreditation to strengthen higher education.
Ah, that 2019 executive order. I remember that.
Right. And that EO specifically requires the DOE to quickly tell accreditors if they find a school isn't compliant.
Didn't that EO also aim to make it easier for schools to switch accreditors? Sort of shake things up?
Yes, that was part of it. Promoting flexibility, competition. So using the accreditor channel like this fits right into that strategy outlined in the EO.
And haven't we seen friction between this administration and Columbia before, specifically about anti-Semitism?
Yes, that's really crucial background. There's a history here. Back in 2019, the administration canceled $400 million in federal grants to Columbia, also citing anti-Semitism concerns.
$400 million? That must have hurt.
Oh, yeah. Sources say it led to about 180 staff cuts, positions funded by those grants. And later, to try and get that money back, Columbia apparently agreed to make some pretty big policy changes.
Like what kind of changes?
Things like changing protest policies, boosting campus security, making shifts in their Middle Eastern Studies department, and adopting a specific definition of anti-Semitism.
So the administration has used different tools pulling grants directly, and now this accreditation threat to pressure Columbia.
Exactly. It shows multiple leverage points being applied.
Which I imagine feeds into some of the commentary we saw in the sources, right? About potential motivations.
It absolutely does. This is where you get different interpretations. Some observers look at this pattern, especially targeting a prominent kind of elite university, and suggest, well, maybe politics are involved.
How so? What's the argument?
The idea floated is that this could be part of a larger, maybe ongoing conflict, an escalating battle, is one phrase used between the administration and institutions they might see as politically opposing them.
Mm-hmm.
There's also commentary expressing, let's say, skepticism about making deals. One piece bluntly says, making deals with Trump is bullshit, suggesting that even if Columbia made concessions before to get funding back, it didn't stop this new action.
A sense of distrust there.
Yeah. And some commentary also raises a broader concern, that actions perceived as weakening major U.S. universities might actually harm the country in the long run.
And just to reiterate, we're relaying these perspectives as they appeared in the source materials, not endorsing them ourselves.
Correct. Just presenting different viewpoints offered in the commentary. And interestingly, the sources also include a critique of the accreditation system itself, which is relevant since that system is the lever being used here.
What's the critique? This was about a different school, right?
Yes, it was discussing another institution, but it raises broader questions. Concerns about transparency in the accreditation process, about whether fear inside universities stops people from reporting problems honestly.
How so?
The authors described a situation where they felt serious issues, like plagiarism, were kind of swept under the rug by both the college and the accreditor to protect the school's image rather than ensure integrity.
That's a serious charge against the system. What was their takeaway?
They basically asked, if accreditors and universities team up to hide problems, then what's the real value of accreditation? It questions if the gatekeeper function sometimes gets compromised.
So this Columbia situation is unfolding against this really complex background, government pressure, previous conflicts, and these underlying questions about the accreditation system itself. Okay, so what actually happens next in this process with MSCHE and Columbia?
Well, MSCHE confirmed they got the DOE letter. Their own policy means they'll now review the evidence, and they'll do that working with Columbia officials. It's not just DOE says jump, MSCHE says how high.
So Columbia gets to respond?
Definitely. They'll have a chance to show MSCHE what steps they've taken or are taking to fix the issues DOE raised and prove they're meeting federal law and MSCHE standards.
How quickly could they lose accreditation? Is that imminent?
The sources stress it's not immediate, it's a process. Universities usually get time to make corrections, and apparently it's very rare in civil rights cases like this for a school to actually lose accreditation in the end.
Why is that?
Because usually the university and the government work out some kind of agreement or resolution plan to get back into compliance. It might involve steps like warnings or probation first.
Has Columbia said anything publicly since this news broke?
Yes, they put out a statement. They acknowledged the concerns from the DOE's Office for Civil Rights, said they've addressed those concerns directly with MSCHE, and basically reaffirmed their commitment to fighting anti-Semitism and working with the federal government on it.
Okay, so the process is moving forward. MSCHE is looking at the DOE's findings and Columbia's response.
That's right. The ball is now formally in the accreditors' court to evaluate the situation based on the evidence and their own standards.
All right, let's pull back for a final thought. This deep dive really shows a complicated picture.
It really does. You see federal anti-discrimination law, university responsibility for campus climate, and this crucial accreditation system all intersecting. And that accreditation piece is directly linked to vital federal funding.
And we see the government using that link, that accreditation status, quite directly as a tool to enforce its findings on legal compliance. That feels like a significant dynamic.
Yes, leveraging that gatekeeper role very pointedly based on a legal determination.
So here's something to really chew on. Thinking longer term, if the government is showing it's willing to use these powerful levers, threatening accreditation, which controls access to federal money, based on legal findings, how could that start to change the whole relationship, between the government, the accreditors, and the universities themselves?
That is the big question, isn't it? Does this push universities towards primarily focusing on satisfying federal demands to protect their funding? And what might that mean for their autonomy, their independence in academic or governance matters? Or maybe it leads to different kinds of negotiations.
And ultimately, what does that shifting dynamic mean for things like academic freedom, the campus environment, and maybe most importantly for the students who depend on both the university's standing and the financial aid? Definitely something to keep thinking about as this plays out. It has implications way beyond just Columbia.
Absolutely. The dynamics here could really shape the future landscape of higher education in the U.S.